Hey guys. All right, so if you've listened to this show before, you've probably heard me just like rave about Beam Dream. Like a lot of people, I used to struggle with poor sleep. I tried everything. I tried Ambien, valerian root, melatonin, I mean, lots of red wine, you name it, and I never was able to sleep well. Then my husband about a year ago introduced me to Beam Dream, and poof, it was like magic. I started sleeping like a baby. I've been drinking it religiously, guys, for like over a year now, and I never realized how much my life was affected by poor sleep until I finally started getting amazing sleep. I even wear an Oura ring, and my sleep scores used to be in the literal gutter. On a good night, they'd be in like the mid-60s, but now with Beam, they're always in the high 90s. If I ever travel for whatever reason and I forget my Beam, they kind of tank right again, but that just shows how great Dream is. And not only have I gotten so many of my friends and family hooked on it, which you guys have seen their own testimonials that I've played for you, but so many of you have reached out through comments and emails telling me that you're hooked on Beam as well, which is why I am just beyond excited to announce that I have officially partnered with them to create an exclusive flavor that pairs two of my favorite flavors, creamy caramel and salted chocolate. And guys, when I tell you we like hit the nail on the head with this flavor, it is so good. Salty chocolate caramel Dream is guilt-free, it's luxurious, it tastes like this sweet, nice treat right before bed. It's only 15 calories, 0 added sugar, and it is clinically shown to help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep throughout the night and wake up refreshed. In a clinical study, over 93% of participants reported that Dream helped them sleep better. Also, a serving of Dream costs less than a cup of coffee, so luxury doesn't have to break the bank either. For me, I like something sweet at night, so it's great for me because instead of jumping right over to the dessert, I just get my cup of Dream. It tastes like yummy hot chocolate. It's like the perfect amount of sweet, salty, everything, and then lights out and I'm asleep. I'm telling you guys, it is amazing. And right now, to celebrate the launch of my custom flavor, Beam is offering you guys up to 40% off. So now is your chance to not only snag it, but also snag it with such an amazing deal. So just click on the link below in my description box or scan the QR code on screen, then use code 10TOLIFE to get up to 40% off. So now is your time, guys. Act fast before it's gone. I hope you guys love it as much as I do. I know you will, and sweet dreams.
Monster called me today.
A family with strong ties to Colchester has not been seen in days.
Monster. So gonna take your loved ones away.
This is not the phone call that I wanted to get this morning. Hey, we've got a couple dead kids to celebrate.
It's time their minds don't live here anymore.
10 to life.
They've been so
With me, Annie Elise.
well to the crowd. Where do we go? Take a turn around death. Worry less, no more numbing stress. Worry less, let them have my flesh. Your medicines won't win this war.
I don't remember anything pretty much over Christmas and the first week I got here.
When you think of Disney, you think of fairy tales. Dashing princes, beautiful princesses, and happily ever after, right? Especially during the golden age of Disney. Every love story ended with a marriage. And while there's more variety to the stories now, the prince and princess stories remain the most popular. I mean, that's just the truth of it, let's face it. Well, for Tony and Megan Todt, the fairy tale seemed like it had come true. They met in high school, got married, stayed married for over 20 years, and they had 3 beautiful children. They even moved to Celebration, Florida, the town built by Disney, next to Disney World. Sounds perfect, right? Well, things are not always what they seem, and this fairy tale ended in a nightmare. This is Dark Chapters.
We dated for 8 years before we were married. The light of my life. Whenever she walked into a room, my stomach would have those butterflies in it, seeing my wife.
Megan and Tony first got together during their time at Montville High School in Montville, Connecticut. Megan's teenage years were happy, they were peaceful. There was a focus on being active and healthy, and Megan really pursued healthy living her entire life. It's something her mother instilled in her at a very young age, and she avoided junk food completely as a child. A friend remembered a time even when another mom told Megan to finish her dinner, which happened to include chips. And Megan informed her that the chips were junk food, and people didn't need to finish junk food to be done with dinner. Aside from healthy living, she also was very active. In high school, she was a drum major and she also played tennis. She was always the mom of her friend group who just tried to make sure that everyone was taken care of. If a friend was hurt or needed something, Megan was there to offer a hand. She was bright, she was kind, and she had nothing negative to say about anyone. She truly was just a thoughtful person from childhood onward. She also loved music. She took piano, played guitar, and she was a skilled singer. Music filled her life, and she shared it with anyone she could. And although her life was extremely busy, between all of her activities, Megan was still able to have fun and spend time with friends. And of course, with her first and only boyfriend, Tony. Now, Tony was quiet, but one of those people who was friends with everyone and involved in a little bit of everything. He was on the student council and a part of a peer leadership team, a group that helped out students in any way, whether it was tutoring or just listening to their problems. Like Megan, people didn't have anything negative to say about Tony. He was thoughtful and friendly with everyone. Tony was the captain of the soccer team, involved in all sorts of different clubs, and he was actually voted most likely to succeed when he was a senior in high school. Now, Tony was 2 years above Megan in school, but they really seemed destined to be together. They started dating, went to his senior prom together, went to her senior prom together, and they stayed together after graduation and during college. They seemed to really complement each other completely. They dated for 8 years before getting married, which was after Tony finished his graduate degree, and it was 2 years before Megan finished hers. In fact, they both finished their graduate degrees in physical therapy at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut, which was not far from where they grew up. And they both worked as traveling therapists for a little bit before they ultimately decided to start a business of their own. Their business was called Family Physical Therapy, and it was located in Colchester, Connecticut. Now, to me, that does sound like a lot of together time, living together, working together, hell, even owning a business together. But Megan and Tony made it work. They were young, they were in love, and they were happy to make Colchester their home together. Now, things were not always perfect though, and we all know that that happens a lot. In fact, part of Megan and Tony's bond came from the fact that they both had endured some traumatic experiences, and they supported each other through it. See, Megan had been diagnosed with Lyme disease as a teenager, although it would go into remission at the beginning of their marriage and their life together. For some reason, Megan had become estranged from her mom, and in 2002, her father took his own life, which absolutely devastated Megan, because the two of them had been extremely close. It was also difficult for Tony, who had been very close to his father-in-law as well. After this, Megan's closest family became her Aunt Cindy and Uncle Stuart, who were like her second parents. Tony, meanwhile, had a strained relationship with his father. He wasn't present for most of Tony's childhood, and they were estranged most of Tony's life. But despite these complications and difficulties, Megan and Tony forged a new family. They had each other, and that seemed to be all that they needed. Being a mom was incredibly important to Megan as well. Even when she was a child, she wanted to be a mom. She and a childhood friend both loved to play with their dolls, and they planned their futures as mothers together. So when Megan and Tony had their first child together in 2006, Megan was just over the moon. She took to being a mother immediately as well. She was still part owner of the practice, but she stopped working so she could be a full-time mom, and she threw herself into this role. She brought the same things that she had experienced as a child to her role as well, focusing on making healthy, organic food choices, keeping her family active, just really living a healthy lifestyle. Megan was constantly cooking in the kitchen, and it was a prime bonding time for her, her aunt, and her grandmother. As her children got older, they joined in the kitchen as well. Their first child was a boy named Alexander, or Alex for short, followed 2 years later by another son named Tyler.
Before she got sick, we were blessed with 2 wonderful boys. She went from a mom who provided for everything to a person who could barely walk stairs on certain days.
While the boys were growing up, the Todts became pillars of the community. Toni was a soccer coach, and Megan was an extremely devoted and ever-present mom to her children. She decided to homeschool her kids, but she kept them engaged with the community. She was connecting with other homeschooling families to do this. And music was a huge part of the Todt world, and both boys took music lessons from a very young age. Their business, the practice, meanwhile, was flourishing. Family physical therapy became the go-to place if you ever needed physical therapy treatments in the community. Toni hired other therapists and opened a second location because business was booming and going so well. He seemed to take naturally to all of the parts of being a business owner. He saw patients, he oversaw staff, and he took care of the billing and the money. And Toni was a good therapist. He had patients who loved him and would recommend him to anyone who needed a physical therapist. The academic high school student he had been was now an equally talented therapist who knew what he was doing. Parents especially noticed how good he was with his young patients. He treated kids with sports injuries or genetic issues and helped them heal, or at least taught them how to treat their issues. He also worked hard to be on top of new technology. He bought an extremely expensive underwater treadmill, which is the best way to describe it, and it was expensive, but he was happy to offer it to his patients as a way to exercise without putting extra strain on any of their joints. His friendly nature meant that he could put any nervous patient at ease, and people would just return to him. They would go to him time and time again. His practice sponsored fundraisers and local teams, and he did whatever he could to help the community. People came to him if they needed a helping hand, and Toni would give it to them. No matter what it was, Toni would support you. Employees also said that Toni was a good boss. He was involved with his employees, whatever they needed, he was ready to help, and one employee remembered that he actually came to her house to fix her leaking toilet. That was the kind of employer he was. He just wanted to help everybody out. The community just loved the Todt family. The community is a very small town with a lot of activities. They have youth sports, local theater, and all sorts of community events. And the Todts, they participated in all of it. So from the outside, they seemed to live an almost charmed life. The business they owned was thriving, they owned a beautiful home, and in 2005, they bought a condo in Celebration, Florida, so that they could go to Disney World whenever they wanted to. And Megan loved her sons deeply, but deep down, she always wanted a girl. When Alec was 9 years old and Tyler was 7, Megan was over the moon to find out that she was pregnant with a little girl. She was thrilled, and she shared it all over social media. Her friends and family followed the progress, and they were overjoyed when she gave birth to a healthy baby girl that they named Zoe. Megan and Toni were extremely proud of their children, and they bragged about them all the time. Alec, the oldest, was described as focused, determined, and able to pick up just about anything. He loved history, especially anything to do with World War I and the military, and he was a huge reader, and people were just blown away by how intelligent he was. Like his mom, he loved music, and he started taking piano at a very young age, and eventually started to learn the violin too. Tyler, meanwhile, seemed more like Toni in that he lived to make other people laugh. He would do anything to brighten someone's day, and he always wanted to help others if he could. Like Alec, he was academically gifted and picked up on things incredibly quickly, although he tended to take to math while Alec was more English and history. Like his older brother, Tyler loved playing soccer, and like his mother, he was also hugely into music. He played piano, and as he got older, Megan planned to teach him guitar. Now baby Zoe, she was known to everyone as Princess Zoe, and it seemed like that was how she lived her life. Her brothers were older, but they knew who the boss of the house was. It was their little sister, who kept everyone in line. She was a goofball with a contagious laugh who just brightened the family and was the perfect third child for Toni and Megan. Zoe had a very strong personality, and she wasn't afraid to let her opinions be known. In 2014, the family also added another family member, a fluffy little dog named Breezy. The family adored this little dog who went everywhere with them. The family seemed to be living a life that most people dreamed of. Everyone who knew the Todt family said that both Toni and Megan were incredible parents. Both of them adored their children, and they adored each other. It was almost too perfect. I'm sure plenty of people looked at this extremely successful, beautiful, healthy, smart family and were jealous about how perfect they appeared. Now, of course, they did have their problems, but it wasn't anything serious or unavoidable. They were just happy. So it seemed like things were perfect. But then, around 2011 or 2012, Megan started to feel sick more often. She started to lose weight, and she started struggling with all sorts of ailments. According to Tony, she struggled with different diseases, including a heart ailment from when she was younger, issues with her lymph nodes, and all sorts of other random things. And it seemed like maybe a bug bite had triggered a flare-up in the Lyme disease that she had been diagnosed with as a teenager. The change definitely hit Megan hard. A healthy, active, involved mother, she now struggled with daily life, according to Tony. And living in Colchester, it seemed to make things worse. And in 2016, she came to Tony to say that she wanted to move to Florida permanently. The warmer weather there was easier on all of her health issues, and if they lived there full time, the kids could spend time outside all year round. Also, being so close to Disney meant that there would be an endless source of entertainment and activities for the kids to do. So in 2016, Megan, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe moved to Celebration, Florida, and they started to set up their new life. They started in the condo that the family owned, but what worked as a vacation home didn't quite fit as a permanent residence. Before long, they needed more space, and they found a new home to rent. It was a big, gorgeous house just a few blocks away at 202 Reserve Place. The new home had a pool, which was very helpful for Megan, and it had an office that Tony hoped to set up at some point. They tried to sell their condo, but they struggled to find somebody to buy it for what it was worth, so it was kind of an extension of their rented house. Now, Celebration is an unusual city. It was designed and built by Disney and has Disney influences throughout the entire community. Disney sold the neighborhood in 2004, but its location is right next to Disney World theme parks, and the community has that kind of like Disney magic feeling. It seems like it has the same feeling as Colchester, though, a small town feel with friendly neighbors and lots of different community activities. So things in Celebration continued pretty much as they had in Colchester. Megan got the boys involved in music lessons, and they attended a homeschooled co-op. Zoe started going to the Montessori Academy of Celebration, which she absolutely loved. Tony, meanwhile, started to split his time between Colchester and Celebration. He would work in his office Tuesday through Thursday, often for over 12 hours a day, and then he would fly out to Celebration on Friday. He would stay there over the weekend, then he would fly back so that he would be back in time for work on Tuesday. It sounds exhausting, and people noticed a change in Tony. Without Megan's healthy cooking, he started to gain a significant amount of weight, and constantly flying didn't help either. He was often distracted and constantly on his phone, even with patients. Tony described his schedule during that time like this. He would fly to Florida early on Friday morning so that he could pick up Zoe from school. Then he would stay the weekend with the family. He'd return to Connecticut for work on Tuesday and see patients from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. Then he would catch up on office work until about midnight or 1 a.m. On Wednesday and Thursday, he would see patients from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Then he would do some office work. And since the old house had been sold, he would stay with his mom or he would stay at a hotel. On Thursday nights, he would usually sleep at the office. Then he would take an early flight to Florida and do the whole thing again. Now, it can't have been an easy or good life. It's just crazy to imagine even living like that. But Tony kept it up for 2 whole years. He was determined to manage his practice and be a stellar dad, the stellar dad that everyone said he was. He wanted the best of both worlds, so he made it work. But on November 21st, 2019, Tony's hectic but fulfilling life was thrown into disarray. The FBI raided one of Tony's family physical therapy practices. His employees were stunned. They weren't sure what was going on. Tony reassured them that it was all a misunderstanding. There was no need to worry. He'd get this all sorted out and everything would be fine. But that wasn't true. According to the FBI, Tony had fraudulently billed Medicare for treatments for at least 2 of his patients, and he had done this for 3 years. According to the records, in one instance, Tony billed Medicare and a private insurance company for up to 55 visits that never happened over the course of a year. Checking the dates of some of the alleged services, many occurred on Saturday, when the therapy practice was closed and when Tony was in Florida. So that means that for years, Tony was using his practice to bill for services that he didn't provide. And if you asked any of Tony's employees, family, or friends, they would have said the same thing as Tony. This was obviously a mistake, a huge misunderstanding. Tony, the man with a magic touch, who was friends with everybody, who was an incredible physical therapist, would never do something like this. It just didn't make sense. So when the FBI interviewed Tony, at first he claimed his innocence, but eventually he admitted to the fraud. He said that his family and his employees didn't know about it though, and it turned out that Tony wasn't a good businessman after all, despite what it might have looked like to outsiders. He had taken out loans that he wasn't able to pay back, so then he took out more loans to pay back the first loans, and things snowballed from there. That same year in 2019, some of his lenders were starting to sue him for non-payment. So Tony quickly found himself in serious debt. Even with his insurance fraud, the money he brought in wasn't enough to help his situation. And in 2019, things were getting dire. He was struggling to keep everything going financially. It was a crack in the facade that would have stunned anyone. Tony was this incredible, upstanding guy. Nobody had anything bad to ever say about him. And this whole time, he had been living a lie. Not only was he spending well outside his means, renovating his big home in Colchester before selling it, owning a condo, then renting a huge, flashy house in Celebration, flying back and forth between Florida and Connecticut every single week, but he was funding it all by fraud. He was committing crimes over and over again to try to keep things going, so he wasn't this perfect person that people thought that he was. But Tony reassured everyone that things were fine, just a misunderstanding. Everything would be fine, he just needed to clear up a few things and go from there. No one knew in November 2019 that anything serious was happening, because they trusted Tony when he said that he would take care of it.
I couldn't understand. I puked. I cried. I was in total denial of what happened. And then after that, I was like, I want to get you help. Just get help. That's all I wanted.
What was the occurrence that made that day memorable?
I came home and my kids were dead. It was the most horrible day of my life.
After speaking with the agents, Tony told them that he needed to go to Florida to take care of some personal business, and then he would come back to Connecticut and he would cooperate with the investigators. The agents agreed, and Tony was free to go. But it wasn't just the business that was struggling. The Todt's personal finances were in complete ruins as well. The house where Megan and the kids were living was being rented, but Tony had fallen behind on the rental payments. On December 1st, the landlord sued the family for the rent that hadn't been paid. It's unclear how much Megan knew about those things. It seemed like while she was part owner, Tony was the head of the business. Megan managed the household, the children, and their education, and also her own health. So if she was aware of their financial situation, she didn't talk to people about it. So Tony returned home to Florida that November. He had canceled his appointments the week before Thanksgiving, and then the week of Thanksgiving, and then he just didn't come back at all. The offices remained open, but Tony wasn't there, which was really upsetting for his regular patients. People went to Tony specifically because of how good he was with his patients, especially the children he saw. But now, nobody knew when he would be back. November then turned into December, and with the holidays coming up, it made sense for Tony to not be in Connecticut since he would be with his family in Florida. People were disappointed, but they understood. Tony was a family man, so of course he said that he was going to be with his family during the holidays. Plus, Alec and Tyler had a Christmas concert in Celebration, Florida that Megan and Tony would obviously be at. The entire family attended the concert on December 14th, 2019, and according to people who were there, absolutely nothing was out of the ordinary. The kids performed wonderfully, and Megan and Tony were there, proud as always. Megan visited with friends at the concert and was back to her normal, bright self. And then after the show, the family went home. Now, usually during the holidays, the Todt family would go back to Connecticut. They would stay with Megan's aunt and uncle and spend time with Tony's mom and sisters. But in 2019, the Todts didn't visit like they normally did. Instead, they spent the holidays in Celebration, Florida. Cindy and Stuart, Megan's aunt and uncle, messaged Megan around Christmas, wishing them a happy holiday and just checking in. Now, at the time, Megan told them that the family was planning a trip to St. Augustine, so they might be away from their phones. But a little bit later, she messaged and said that the entire family was sick. They couldn't even talk on the phone, and they weren't going to be going to St. Augustine after all. Then, eventually, Tony texted them back saying that Megan had lost her phone, and the entire family was going to go off the grid for a little bit. And that was the last contact that anyone had with the Todt family. After that, they didn't answer their phones, they didn't post online, nothing. Friends and family in Colchester and even in Celebration reached out, but heard nothing. This family, that had been such an important part of their communities, both communities, was just gone, vanished. Tony's sister Chrissy was the first to raise the alarm. On December 29th, after not hearing from her brother or his family for weeks, she called Celebration and she requested a welfare check.
County Sheriff Office report line just begin. I can help you.
I'm wondering if somebody can do a wellness check on my brother and his family. They've been really sick for probably like the past week and a half, and I can't seem to get a hold of them. 202 Reserve Place in Celebration.
Okay. When was the last time you heard from them, ma'am?
The last time I physically talked to him was on either Monday or Tuesday, and he was texting my sisters and I up until Thursday. Was supposed to call us between yesterday and today, and we haven't been able to get a hold of him. I can't get a hold of him, my sister-in-law, or even my nephew.
Okay, what is your name?
My name is Chrissy. Last name is Caplet.
That address, is that an apartment or is that a house?
He's renting a house.
Okay. Okay, do you have a cell phone number or phone number for him?
I do. He's not, his phone, I think it's turned off.
Do you know what kind of vehicle he drives?
No, he lives up here during the week and he flies down for the weekend, so he usually has, I think he's got a rental when he goes down there.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been really sick. I guess they've had the flu. But they've had the flu probably for a couple weeks. They were really down and out during Christmas. The only one we've been able to talk to is my brother. And now, like I said, we can't get hold of any of them. Last time, like I said, I heard from him was Thursday. And he was supposed to call us. He was supposed to check in with us yesterday, and then he was, because they were doing their Christmas yesterday, supposedly, and then he was supposed to call us today. And none of my sisters or my mother has heard from him, and we can't get a hold of him.
Okay. All right, we're going to have somebody come over. Then when the deputies get there, they're going to call you from the block of private number to let you know the outcome, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
It is my pleasure. Have a good night, ma'am.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
The police went to the home but said that there was nobody there. The house, it appeared empty. They couldn't establish contact either. Tony's sisters then created a Facebook group called Looking for the Todt Family, and there they tried to use the Todt's friends and acquaintances to find them. The news that the Todts were missing spread through Colchester quickly. Again, this was a family that everybody knew, everybody loved. Tony was a huge presence in the community, and even though Megan and the kids didn't live there anymore, everybody knew them too. They were the light of Tony's life as well. So the fact that nobody knew where they were, it was extremely confusing to everyone. But it wasn't just their friends and family looking for the Todts. By the end of December, Tony had been in Florida taking care of his personal business for a month, and those federal agents who were investigating his insurance fraud, they were now getting antsy. So they reached out to Tony and to the office, but they couldn't get in touch with him. Things had been cordial up until then, but if Tony didn't return to talk to the agent soon, he was going to be arrested. Then, on January 6th, 2020, an eviction notice was served to one of the family physical therapy practices. Tony's employees, who hadn't been in contact with their boss and didn't know what was going on, were totally stunned. Things were now even more confusing for everyone. Nobody knew what was going on, but it was looking bad. Without Tony there to explain things, his employees were left just completely in the dark. They didn't know if they had jobs, if the practice was in trouble, or what was going on. On January 10th, Chrissy called the police in Florida again, this time to request a second welfare check. It had been almost a month since anyone had seen the Todts in person.
County Sheriff's Office is Vantage Quarter. This is Tiffany. How can I help you? Hi. I don't know who I need to speak with. I'm curious if I can have a wellness check done. What's the address for the wellness check? The address for the wellness check is 202 Reserve Place in Celebration. I had actually called on December 29th, and I had an officer go out because I was concerned. My brother and his family, they had all been sick. But there's actually been more in conversations with my sister, my sister-in-law was making a comment about, and we just kind of put it all together, about basically the world ending on the 28th, and nobody has talked to them. Nobody physically talked to my sister-in-law since the 26th of December, and my brother has stopped texting as of Monday. So I don't know if there's a way that somebody can go out. They are renting a place. They're actually being evicted from that property. But that's the last place that we know that they were supposedly at. But they have a condo that's right around the corner as well. So they think the world is ending, and you're worried they're gonna because of a lot of stuff that's been happening, that there could be something a little bit more happening. The last time anybody talked to my brother, text my brother, not even talking, text my brother was on the 6th. Okay, we'll get somebody out there, okay? Thank you. Bye-bye.
For a family that was often out and about, it was unheard of for them to just disappear. People went to the house in celebration, but there was nobody there. And again, the police were unable to make any contact with the family. It seemed like nobody was in the house. The Todt's neighbors didn't think anything of the family's absence, though. During the holidays, people tend to leave to visit family, so it made sense that they weren't home. And some of the houses there were actually second homes, so it wasn't unusual for families to be gone for months at a time while they lived their lives elsewhere. In the neighborhood, things didn't seem too unusual. By the beginning of January, the federal agents were starting to close in on Tony. After a month of failing to make contact with him, the FBI issued a warrant for his arrest for the insurance fraud. So agents started to put surveillance on the house on 202 Reserve Place, determined to find and arrest Tony. The federal agents also reached out to the Florida Sheriff's Department, trying to get their help in locating Tony. But the sheriff's office had already checked on the house twice, and they couldn't find the family. Nobody knew where the Todts were. Finally, on January 13th, 2020, a federal agent spotted Tony in the Florida house. He contacted the sheriff's office, who came to support the arrest and check on the family. So finally, it seemed like there would be answers to the questions that had plagued those immediately surrounding the family. What was going on? Where was everyone? Police broke into the house to arrest Tony. They found him in a very confused and disoriented state. He was struggling to walk and seemed almost like he might be under the influence of something. The agents asked him questions, but he was sluggish and he was slow to answer, unsure of his responses. Body cam footage shows the agents arriving to arrest Tony.
Good. Tony, you coming downstairs? All right. 30 left. 97 at 2, Reserve Place, reference both 93.
We left? Yeah, upstairs? I think so. Tony, you upstairs? Hey, come downstairs, bud. No. Alright? Yeah, take your time. Need some help? Alright, everything's alright, man. Just stay calm.
Ready? Hey, we're gonna check this.
Goes to the kitchen. Or whatever it is. Any children here?
I can't remember if they went to a sleepover last night.
Keep coming down.
Oh, she did. She did.
Yeah, like 7-7.
Where's your wife sleep at?
Gotcha.
Where's your wife's at?
Upstairs.
What's up?
Oh, you good? You got any weapons on you?
Any needles? Knives, nothing like that?
No.
Okay. What's your wife's name?
Megan.
Has anyone heard her talk? No. Megan? Or
Meg?
all right, come on down, buddy. Come. All right. Here comes the dog in front of you. Take control.
Yep.
All right, just sit. Have a seat. You good? I got you. Just have a seat.
Megan!
Face forward for me, all right? Put your hands forward. All right.
Megan?
Got a locked door right here.
Megan?
Got a 7, looks like that.
What's that?
Sorry, just get it.
All right, just stay still on it. Hang tight.
One 24-011. EMB 51 over here. I believe we got 2 signal 7.
All right, hang tight. You want me to get a chair for you to sit down in? What's that?
Hey, can you run out there and grab some gloves?
We got it.
We still can't find the daughter.
What?
Where's Zoe?
I haven't seen her. She went with you. Oh, no, I didn't see her. I was sleeping. She wasn't here. I haven't seen her. Check the garage.
Investigators noticed that there didn't seem to be any power, and the house, it also had a stuffy feel, like no one had come or gone in weeks. Additionally, the police noticed a very foul smell. Then they moved upstairs, and that is when the smell got worse. The main bedroom was unlocked, so police went inside. Inside the large room was the master bed and 2 additional mattresses on the floor. At first glance, police could see what looked like the silhouettes of human figures. They were wrapped completely in blankets on all 3 mattresses. In total, there were 3 people. The agents went closer, and they discovered that the figures were actually 3 bodies. 3 of the missing Todts had been found. Megan, who was 42 at the time, was on the master bed, and Alec, who was 13, and Tyler, who was just 11, were on the mattresses. The bodies were too decomposed to tell what had happened at first glance, but it was obvious that all 3 of them had been dead for quite some time. Now, at first, investigators couldn't find Zoe, and they went to go ask Tony where she was, but he didn't seem to understand the question, and he didn't have a coherent answer. Police continued to search the house, trying to find her. They searched all of the rooms upstairs, but she seemed to be missing, until eventually police noticed a pile of blankets at the foot of the master bed. And when they searched that pile, they found the body of Zoe, who was just 4 years old. The search for the Todts had come to a horrifying conclusion. Tony, who came to be known as the Disney Dad, was immediately arrested, and word spread quickly that Megan, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe, they were all dead. Police eventually discovered the body of Breezy as well, that fluffy little dog. He, too, had been murdered. Now, I've talked about a lot of murder cases, but this case is one of the few where it seems like absolutely no one in the Todts' lives saw something like this coming. Not one person involved with the Todts knew what to make of any of this. It wasn't clear at first how the Todts died either, but it obviously wasn't natural, which meant someone had killed Megan and her 3 children. Now, it would have made sense for people to immediately assume that Tony was involved, but that was almost as hard to believe as it was that the deaths even happened. Everyone, literally everyone, said that Tony adored his wife and loved his children. Everything Megan and Tony did was for their family. It was inconceivable that Tony could be involved. But if he wasn't, who else could it be? Both Colchester and Celebration were devastated by this discovery. Within a few days, on January 20th, a vigil was held in Celebration for the family, with a second vigil then held in Colchester on January 24th. Friends and family, as well as strangers, all came together at both vigils to celebrate and honor the 4 lives that had been taken. Shock was probably the strongest emotion in the crowd those nights, followed closely by grief. Because how could a family that seemed so perfect, so happy, have their lives just snuffed out? What had happened in that house? Now, by then, Tony had been arrested and charged with the murder, but friends and family, they still couldn't process it. This was a man that everybody knew. Could he really be a murderer? Police continued to investigate the house where Tony had lived with these bodies of his family for weeks. They removed 2 knives and other evidence from the scene, as well as multiple boxes and bottles of Benadryl. The police asked him about his family's death, and while he seemed confused, he eventually confessed to the murders. However, an evaluation by medical staff determined that he was suffering from a Benadryl overdose. So because of that, he was sent to the hospital for treatment. Then, once he was cleared, he was placed back in custody. An autopsy was performed on Megan and the 3 children, with a final ruling that all 4 family members had died of homicidal violence of unspecified means in association with diphenhydramine toxicity. Diphenhydramine is more commonly known as Benadryl. It's an antihistamine with sedating effects. Megan had been stabbed in her stomach 2 times with wounds that were 8 inches deep. She received her wounds either before she died or right around the time that she died. It was very difficult to tell which. Alec had 1 stab wound on his abdomen, which damaged one of his ribs. And Tyler had a stab wound that damaged his large intestine. Now Zoe, the 4-year-old, she didn't have any visible external injuries, but Breezy, the family dog, had been stabbed multiple times. Now, because Benadryl can be used as a sedative, especially in small children, police theorized that the family was drugged with Benadryl, which could have rendered them unconscious, before ultimately they were all stabbed to death, not including Zoe. Now, with this new information, the police went back to Tony to see what his explanation was. He had been cleared from the hospital after his Benadryl overdose, and now he was willing to talk. So they read him his Miranda rights, and then they asked him what happened to Megan and the kids. They talked to him for over 2 hours, and here is what Tony said. According to Tony, around April of 2019, Megan had started getting into alternative religions, which seemed based on Eastern teachings. And based on these new religious ideas, she started believing that the end of the world was near. She showed these videos to Tony, and the 2 of them started to plan how they could go to the next world together, all as a family, to save their souls. They started researching drugs that they could get which would put them asleep for good, but eventually they decided that it would be a better idea to do an ancient sacrifice, where the family would bleed to death instead. So according to Tony, they decided together that they would give everybody Benadryl to make them sleepy, then stab them so that they would bleed to death quickly and painlessly. According to Tony, Megan made a pie that was laced with Benadryl so that all of the kids would be tired, they would eat it, they would fall asleep, and then they enacted their plan. When it came to planning when they'd pass on, here's what Tony said.
I'm still trying to remember when the children died. I can't put those pieces together.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
We wanted the kids to stick around for the Christmas holiday concert because we didn't want to disappoint that.
Did you guys celebrate Christmas Day?
No, the kids are there before Christmas.
Because family is saying that
we were sick.
Well, that they spoke with Megan the day after Christmas. Was Megan alive the day after Christmas?
No, she died right the day after the boys did.
Right. I remember you saying that the other day. That's why. But I've made contact now with your family and with Megan's family, and so Megan's family is 99% sure that, looking back through cell phone records and stuff, that they spoke with her, not text message. They spoke with her the day after Christmas.
No.
And she said the children were sick.
No.
Okay, so you're adamant that they died before Christmas?
Yes.
Okay. The children, you said, died 24 hours or so a day prior to Megan?
Correct.
Okay.
They wanted the kids to go to the holiday concert, but that was all they planned for the kids. The children were dead before Christmas, and Megan was dead within a day of her 2 boys. Police pointed out that Megan's family was getting messages from her the day after Christmas, though, but Tony is certain that she was dead before that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So the police and Tony both moved on to what happened the day that the family was killed.
The children, you said, died 24 hours or so a day prior to Megan?
Correct.
Okay, so let's go to the day of their death. How did this go down?
Woke up at 11:30 at night. We set the alarm for 11:30 at night, and got up out of bed. And it was to Zoe first.
Okay.
Meg walked into the room, and she walked back into her room.
Step by step. So you guys are sleeping in the master room, I'm assuming.
Yes, my wife and I, yes. And the dog.
And the puppy. Okay. Which boy was upstairs?
Zoe was upstairs in her room.
Okay.
Alec was upstairs in his room. Tyler was asleep downstairs in the library room.
And why again was he down there?
The 2 of them were sick, so we kept them apart.
Okay. All right. So, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So we walked to the door, Zoe's door. Meg and I hugged and kissed, and pretty much we know what we need to do. Come back at me when we're done. So I went in Zoe's room, and it took me 2 or 3 hours sitting there because it's a tough. But the everlasting salvation and the thought of that everlasting salvation was there, and I needed to save her soul, wanted her to be with us. Megan kept coming in. What's going on? I'm like, it'll be done in a little bit. It'll be done in a little bit. It's getting past that. I'm not that guy, you know. The initial thought was to stab into the umbilicus above the navel, so I could get the inferior vena cava or the abdominal aorta, and it'd be bleed out within no time whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I know I tried. I don't know if I ever punctured it. I don't know if I did or not. I saw a little mark on her, but I don't know if I saw anything. But then she rolled and started squiggling, and I put my hand over her mouth and then put a pillow over top of her. So she went, and then she started to fade away. And I just held that until there was no motion left.
So you didn't lay on her?
I did lay on her when she lay on her belly. I'm sorry. I laid on her to keep her down, and I put the pillow on top.
Yep. Do you think you stabbed her or no?
I don't know. I didn't see any. I didn't see anything.
Okay. So how long would you say it took you to take her life?
The whole motion?
Yeah.
Like from the minute I was sitting in there, or from?
Well, I'm saying once you initially take action. Okay. Did you have a knife with you?
Yes.
Which knife did you have with you?
The small knife.
Which is what color?
Green.
Okay, that's the green buck knife that you talked about?
The green buck knife, yes.
Okay. All right. So you had that in her bed.
Mm-hmm.
So how long from the time that you had the knife out to the suffocation until you think that she was deceased?
I want to say 10 minutes, 15 minutes, right around there. It seemed like that night took forever, so it's hard to really gauge on the time.
Okay. And you said you used a pillow over her head?
Yes.
Was she face up or face down?
She kept moving. think she was on her back with her head towards the wall. So in that way.
So for 10 minutes to 15 minutes, you held a pillow over your daughter's head?
Mm-hmm.
How long did she kick and scream?
Only for a couple of minutes.
A couple minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Zoe was upstairs in her room, Alec was upstairs in his bedroom, and Tyler was downstairs in the library room. He was sick, and he had been separated from the others. Megan and Tony got up at 11:30 p.m. and confirmed their plans. Tony then went into Zoe's room, planning to stab her directly in the heart so that she would bleed to death quickly. It took him hours to do anything, with Megan coming in checking in on the delay and Tony assuring her that he would do it. He eventually tried to stab Zoe, but he wasn't able to pierce her with that blade. That's also confirmed by the autopsy because remember, she did not have a stab wound like the other family members did. So instead, according to Tony, he tried, but when Zoe started to fight him, Tony then held a hand over her mouth and laid on her to keep her from moving. He then covered her face with a pillow until she stopped fighting altogether. This took about 10 to 15 minutes.
So now Zoe is deceased.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens next?
Walk out. Stood with Megan in the room for a little while.
How was the body?
How do you mean?
How was the positioning? Where was the pillow?
There was a pillow behind her head, and her hands were out to the side. And I made sure the covers were on top of her, just in essence to keep her warm.
Did she have anything in her hands?
No, I had put a rosary in her hands later on when I moved.
When you moved the bodies?
When I moved the bodies, yes.
Okay, we'll get to that. And that was post-rigor?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, we're getting a little bit ahead of
No, that's okay.
I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Okay. So Zoe's gone. You and Megan console each other, whatever you guys have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens?
We go into Alex's room.
Alex's room?
Yes. The one next to the bathroom, one upstairs.
Well, upstairs. Okay.
Yeah. And beforehand, we had talked about the aspect of she's got to hold his feet down. And I'll do the stab.
How old's Alec?
13.
Okay, so he's the oldest. Okay. Okay, so what happens?
We walk in. He's on his back. She's just sitting there holding his feet together. We're just in there, just eyeing each other, just gaining the confidence, I guess, And I go to, I stabbed him, and he started kicking. Was trying to get up, and he kept rolling. So I ended up there was a pillow there. I ended up putting a pillow in the back of his head so he wouldn't hit me with the back of his head. And then I reached around with my hand and held his nose in his mouth. And he kept rolling and kicking and rolling and kicking, and then it eventually stopped.
Where was Megan at?
Megan left midway through there and went back to the room.
How long would you say it took to kill Alec?
That one I have no idea. It went quickly, but I don't know.
Okay. And there was blood and everything in his bed?
On his bed, yes.
Next, Tony and Megan went to Alec's room. Megan held down Alec's legs, but he started to move when Tony tried to stab him. Like Zoe, Alec fought, so Tony put his hand over his mouth, over his nose, and held him down. Then he stabbed Alec. The wound was a few inches deep, and it nicked Alec's rib. The death didn't take long. Tony said Megan left halfway through, but eventually Alec, like Zoe, was dead. There was one spot that Tony mentioned where he said they tried to stab all of his children where it would cause them to bleed out quickly, but it apparently didn't work. It was one of the two big veins that carries blood into the heart. But it doesn't sound like the plan worked for any of the children. Their injuries were in their abdomen, and it didn't sound like any of their injuries pierced the heart. According to Tony, he used the website Quora.com to find out about knife techniques and where he had to stab a person to cause a quick death. He and Megan had been researching knife techniques since before Halloween. Then, Tony and the interrogators went over the research that Tony says he did, and they moved on to Tyler's death.
So Tyler, in which room downstairs was Tyler in?
Tyler was in the library room downstairs.
Library room. So if I walk in the house, where at?
You have to walk in the house. The first room on the left is the music room.
Mm-hmm.
The second room on the left is the library room with the double French door things.
Okay. And that's the room. Was he on a mattress? Was he?
He was on the mattress, and the mattress. My wife is very adamant about mattress covers. So he was on top of the mattress cover and all his blankets and everything.
Did that mattress stay downstairs?
That mattress stayed downstairs. The cover and everything else was brought up when I brought him up to the room.
So obviously there should be, if he bled or bled out, there should be signs of that on the mattress.
The mattress was clean because of the cover.
What do you mean by cover?
By the mattress cover.
Which is cloth?
I don't know what it is, but it doesn't allow fluid or anything to go through.
Okay. All right.
When I moved him, I was able to under the cover.
But that's sometime later.
Correct.
All right. So Tyler is killed. Who's in the room when he's killed?
It's just me and Tyler. Megan is outside in the door.
What is she saying during any of this?
She's doing meditations.
Tony didn't offer a lot of details, just that the mattress, which is always kept in the library, wouldn't show any signs of blood or violence. The mattress cover protected it. Megan wasn't in the room with him for this murder either. It was just him and Tyler. Like Alec, Tyler was stabbed and then left to bleed to death. After that, Megan and Tony had to figure out what to do next. Tony said that he suffocated the family dog Breezy, but he couldn't account for the stab wounds that the police found. Then they put the dog at the foot of the bed, on Megan's side.
Did you where did you kill the dog at?
It was on the foot of the bed on Megan's side.
In the master room?
That's correct.
Okay. And that was, the final resting spot was in the master bedroom, correct?
Correct.
All right. So the dog's dead. Now what happens?
Meg wanted to go.
Okay.
So we had decided, I said, what do you want me to get? Wine? What do you want to help calm this down so it won't hurt as much? We had some spray stuff, and so she could use that instead. So she wanted some wine and some it's purple Tylenol PM. She started taking that a little bit. Gave her the knife. I laid next to her, and she put the knife into her stomach. Okay. And I said, "Did you get the spot? It's right here." She said, "Yeah, I feel it." Okay. We're laying there for 45 minutes. It's supposed to take about 10 minutes, what everybody says. If you hit the spot.
And what is in that spot? What are you talking about?
The inferior vena cava.
Okay.
On the umbilicus. You're supposed to be able to bleed out. They say 1 to 4 minutes, but under 10 minutes.
And what are you specifically targeting within that area?
The inferior vena cava.
Okay.
It's the big blood return.
Okay.
It's a large vessel, and you bleed out in your abdomen. It's quick.
All right.
Okay.
How much did she consume? Wine or I'm assuming, is it grape flavored? You keep saying purple.
Yeah, the first one was grape flavored.
What do you mean first one?
She had a glass of wine with the stuff. Okay. We were laying there for about 45 minutes after she stabbed herself. She says, "I feel nothing happening. Nothing happening." I said, "Okay, this is good. What do you want to do?" She said, "Do we have any Benadryl?" I said, "We have liquid Benadryl." She goes, "Let me have that. Let me try some of that. Maybe that'll put me to sleep or let me go sooner."
Mm-hmm.
So she was drinking liquid Benadryl. And I was checking back on her, give her some peace. Walked around, came back, walked around, came back. And at one point I thought she had passed from doing the Benadryl. Nope, she was still there. And she had sat up.
What makes you think she passed?
She was very quiet. There was no motion. I couldn't see her abdomen going up and down. This is from afar without even me going up to see her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Was her eyes open?
Eyes were closed.
She communicating with you?
When I came up, I was like, "Meg?" She was like, "I'm here." And I said, "Okay." So I said, "What do you want to do? You want to try more Benadryl? Do you want the knife back again? What do you want to do?" She goes, "Let me try some more Benadryl. And then if not, we'll do a second stab." Okay. gave her a bunch more Benadryl. Like I said, let that settle in for a while. Settle in.
When you say a bunch more, you got a approximate amount?
I really don't. I know she was. She
went chugging bottles.
Yes, there was I don't know. There was a big bottle, like a family size Benadryl thing.
She killed the whole bottle,
and in 2 different sippings. Yes.
Well, okay.
Okay. And that wasn't happening, so she decided to go through her liver. Okay. We looked at. I pulled up the thing and the hepatic liver. We laid it out on where it was on her skin, according to landmarks. And I said it's right in this area. So okay. Then she, with 2 hands, pushed in, and you heard like a little click, as if it went through something. Okay. So I was like, okay, sounds like it went through the liver. That's good. Okay. She pulled it out. She put the knife right next to her, and I just laid with her. And I laid there and held her, and we just waited. It seemed like hours went by, nothing else happening. I got up. I wanted to check on our boys and our little one and make sure everything was going okay in the house. Everything was okay. Came back and she's sitting up at the edge of the bed. And she's cleaning the wound. I'm like,
what was she cleaning it with?
It was one of my t-shirts. She had, I think she had a towel at one point.
Okay.
She was definitely, I can't, but she was up, she was washing it, rinsing it at one point. And she was like, this has got to be done. This is taking too long. This is ridiculous. I'm like, shall we go on, look at different other aspects to do this? How do you want to do this? She goes, I want this ended now. What does that mean? She goes, I want you to take the pillowcase, put a pillow, put it over my head. I said, I don't know if I can do that. And she looked at me, she goes, if you love me, you can do this. I want to be with my babies. And so, yeah, and she just looked at me and she goes, you're strong enough, you can do it. Okay. So I said, why don't you take some more Benadryl? So at least you're not going to fight me. And I'll do it. So she goes, she took some more Benadryl. And maybe about 15 minutes later, I came back in the room. I said, do you still want to do this? And she talked to me like that, very far out. Yeah, get it done.
So how much Benadryl did you guys have?
I don't know.
After that, according to Tony, Megan was ready to go. So she drank some wine, and then the two of them were lying together in the master bedroom. Tony said that Megan used the same knife that was used on the kids, and she stabbed herself with it. Now, she should have bled out quickly, but 45 minutes later, she was still alive. When she still hadn't died, she asked for Benadryl, and she drank a very large amount. Then, she stabbed herself in the liver, hoping that that would kill her. Tony thought that she had died, but she was still alive after this. At one point, when he came back into the room, she was sitting up. Then they started discussing next steps. And Megan told Tony that if he really loved her, he would help her die so that she could be with her babies. She told Tony that he was strong enough to do it, so Tony suffocated her. Tony said that Megan told him to wait a day or two before taking care of himself so that he could make sure that everything was set up. According to Tony, he tried to take Benadryl, but Megan had needed more than they thought, so he went to multiple stores to get even more Benadryl for himself to take.
Okay, and I also thought that it might be easier. See, I'm not much about guns in the house, but I was reading on Quora that you could kill yourself with a pellet gun.
Pellet gun?
That's what I was reading. It hurt.
Where'd you shoot yourself?
In the liver and the heart. I have 2 wounds.
The liver and the heart.
Mm-hmm. The liver the first time. It bled quite a bit.
Tony said that according to Quora.com, he could potentially take his life with a pellet gun, and records show that he bought a pellet gun, Gatorade, and M&Ms from a store on December 18th. Then he tried to shoot himself. And while it hurt, it didn't kill him. Tony said he tried other ways, at least 8 different times, including hanging, trying to stab himself, and even using razor blades. He also admitted that he was pretending to be his family members in text messages to friends and family. His goal was to keep people away long enough for him to take his own life, but he never could actually do it. 2 days after Megan's death, he started to arrange his family the way that they had been found. Their bodies were in rigor mortis, so Tony waited until they had softened and carried them to the master bedroom. He vividly described how he laid Zoe at the bottom of the bed, wrapped in a blanket. Then he moved Tyler's mattress into the bedroom and then carried Tyler with difficulty up to the room. Finally, he took Alec off his bed, brought in the mattress from Alec's room, and then carried Alec into the room. Now what's interesting is when he said all of this, he was adamant that he would not drag his son. He carried them into the room. Then he arranged the bodies and covered them with blankets. He also created a little memorial with some of their favorite things. Tony described little trinkets that he had left with the bodies, things that they wanted to bring with them into the afterlife, like a soccer scarf for Tyler, and he also put rosaries in the kids' hands or around their necks. After arranging his family, Tony continued to sleep and live in that room while trying those other ways to take his own life. And that continued until January 13th, when he and his family were discovered. Throughout the entire police interview, Tony was calm. He responded to the questions and kept up the conversational tone as well. He didn't cry, he didn't panic, he didn't have any type of physical or emotional reaction. He just calmly went through what happened. And it was almost eerie to just see him sitting with his hands and his feet in cuffs, just talking about the murder of his children and his wife so calmly, so casually. So now, based on his confession, this sounds like a tragic tale of shared mental illness. Megan started down a dark hole, dragged Tony in with her, and in a moment of shared delusion, they conspired to kill their children and themselves. But then, the longer that the interview went on, the more suspicious some of Tony's answers became. I mean, at least to me. For instance, Tony claimed that he was determined to join his family. But he also admitted to leaving the house to get fast food, which doesn't make a whole bunch of sense to me. You'd think that if you were in this fog of horror, living with your dead family, food would probably be the last thing on your mind. He also claimed that he was in some sort of altered state, drinking, overdosing on Benadryl, and in shock, and that he was trying to keep people from finding him. But he did that by sending text messages where he pretended to be other members of his family. That takes a degree of awareness. You have to know what you're going to say, how you're going to say it so that you don't sound suspicious. And Megan's family didn't even suspect that it wasn't her until after all of this came out. He did a great job. It's never been made clear, but during Chrissy's second welfare call, she mentioned that Megan had mentioned the end of the world to her, which made Chrissy even more concerned, of course. Since no one has ever talked about Megan having any concerns about the apocalypse, I seriously do wonder if that was Tony, acting as Megan and planting that narrative. At one point, someone found Tony's phone that was left at a Starbucks in Sarasota, 2 hours away, and that was before he was able to return and retrieve it. So again, while he claimed that he was barely aware of what he was doing and in a haze of drinking alcohol and taking Benadryl, he was leaving the house, and he was acting normal enough that nobody noticed him. He also said that he and Megan wrote a suicide note on the computer, which he printed out and he had out in the house. And while Tony said that he and Megan had been planning for this for months, nobody outside the family noticed anything. Even as late as December 14th, people said that the family appeared completely and totally normal, which you would think that if Megan was obsessed with the idea of the end of the world, maybe she would have mentioned it to other people, including her family members, but she didn't say anything to anyone. And also, do you remember how Tony said that he and Megan didn't plan for the kids to live until Christmas? Well, there were presents under the Christmas tree. So why buy gifts that you have no intention of ever opening? Things just didn't make sense.
How you feel, Tony? Why do you kill your family?
Telling people you couldn't have done this. Do you have
What do you have to say to their family?
What about the dog? What about Reese?
Tony was charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of animal harm because he had killed the family dog. The friends and family of the Todt family were absolutely horrified. By then, news about Tony's arrest for fraud had also leaked out, and people were now discovering that the man they knew, this man who was present and available to everyone, who had absolutely a perfect life, had been lying the entire time. But a little more digging by police and journalists uncovered another secret that Tony had kept to himself for years. He was not the first person in his life to present one side of himself to the public and keep a darker side hidden away. Now remember how I said that Tony's father wasn't around for the majority of his life? Well, that's because he was in prison after being found guilty of conspiracy to murder his wife, Tony's mom. In 1980, Robert Todt, Tony's dad, was married to Loretta, and they had 2 children, including Tony, who was 4 years old. Like Tony and Megan, they had a picture-perfect life. They were well respected, they were liked by everybody, and they lived in a town right outside of Philadelphia. But then, on March 19th in 1980, during the evening, someone came into the Todt house and they shot Loretta in the face. The bullet went through her left eye and it was lodged in her skull, but luckily she survived the attack. Tony's father, Robert, wasn't home at the time and came home around 11:45 p.m. to find his wife gravely injured and the neighbors trying to help her. Police were still investigating when they arrested a man named John Chermonti. John was 19 or 20 years old and intellectually disabled with a history of drugs and alcohol. And during an interrogation for this other charge that he had been arrested for, John admitted to the shooting. But John was also a former student of Robert's, and he testified that Robert approached him and offered him $800 to go to his house and shoot this person in the front bedroom. He never told John that it was his wife, and he also told him not to hurt anybody else in the house because the 2 children were at the house too. But he gave John the keys so that he could get into the house, and he also gave him the gun and the bullets. Now, Robert's motive, according to the police, was the fact that he was engaged to another woman in another town. Like, full-on engaged, full-on second life. The 2 of them were supposed to get married in April of that year, and people knew about it. Invitations had already even been sent. So as the wedding date was approaching, he knew he had to do something, and he needed to do it fast. And not only was he engaged to another woman, guys, but he also had a 17-year girlfriend. He was living all sorts of separate secret lives. Then, even after Robert was arrested, he denied being guilty of the crime. Loretta, despite what the police told her, believed him, and she supported her husband all through his trial. The jury, however, did not believe him, and he was found guilty of attempted homicide, criminal conspiracy, and criminal solicitation. John got 5 years for the attempted murder in exchange for his testimony against Robert, while Robert was sentenced to 10 to 20 years. Eventually, Loretta accepted that he was the one responsible, and the 2 of them divorced, and that's when she moved to Connecticut. So this is just one more layer and another piece of the puzzle of who Tony Todt was, who he really was, who he was as a child, where he had been traumatized by the attack on his mother, and I can't imagine how odd it would be to have any sort of relationship with the man who put you through that. But Tony really tried. He and his dad Robert at least kind of corresponded a little bit, and that even continued after Tony was arrested. While in prison awaiting trial, Tony sent his father a 27-page handwritten letter with a completely different story. He was actually innocent of the crimes entirely. The letter is rambling and goes off in tangents, but in it, Tony laid out what he now says actually happened that night. According to the letter, it wasn't Tony who had killed the children. It was Megan. Megan had drugged the children, stabbed them in their sleep, and had then taken her own life by stabbing herself twice. Tony didn't know what the plan was until he came home after spending the night at the condo, and then he found all of the children already dead. Then Tony, in an effort to protect the wife that he loved, decided to take the blame and concocted the story that he was the one who killed the children. In the letter, he also blamed Megan for the fraud case, saying that she was the one who was in charge of all of the billing when all of the fraudulent claims had happened and when they all went through. So he says that charge against him was bogus as well. Tony said in his letter that ever since Megan started getting sick in 2011 or 2012, it led to a host of issues and even led to at least 2 miscarriages, which just absolutely devastated her. She struggled with depression and could barely get out of bed some days, and that was partially what had led them to move to Florida. Tony said that she didn't share much about her issues, that she preferred to deal with them quietly and privately. He described Megan getting deeply into alternative religion involving reincarnation and also the end of times, but he made it seem like he was only partially involved. Megan, he claimed, was desperate to find some sort of solution to the health issues that had plagued her for the majority of her life. So she turned to these religious ideas to gain control of her life. Again, this all according to Tony. On the day of the murders, Tony said that he had an amazing day with his family. He spent time with his children and with his wife. He played basketball with the boys, and he played tag with his daughter. Megan asked him to go to the condo to try to find a necklace that belonged to Zoe, and he agreed. He also planned to stay the night at the condo because Megan was using some sort of essential oil that bothered his sinuses, and he had a hard time sleeping anyway. So he said that he drove to the condo where he fell asleep in his car while he was charging an iPod. He woke up late the next day after the sun was up and went right home. Apparently, he would treat Megan every morning to help her with her pain, and he didn't want to get scolded by Megan for missing the treatment. He actually walked from the condo to 202 Reserve Place since it was close, and he mentioned in his letter he couldn't get his car started and that's why he decided to walk. Then when he went into the house, he saw the remnants of a dessert on the table which looked good but smelled bad. He told his father he later realized that it was, quote, the Benadryl pudding pie. When he went inside, he said Megan talked to him about some of her visions about the end of the world, and how she had a chance to save the souls of her children and herself. His letter then said, to make a long story short, she gave them Benadryl/Tylenol PM, gave it to them in a pie, separated them, woke up at 11:30, stabbed, and then suffocated each one. So after pages of going on and on about his kids, his health issues, Megan's health issues, and all sorts of random information, he used just one line to discuss the murder of his children. He said Megan remained calm, although Tony was freaking out about finding his children dead. He tried to clean up the kids and make sense of what had happened. He then watched as Megan stabbed herself. He told her they needed to call the police. He would take the blame since he wasn't there to stop everything. But she told him she just needed him to be there. She told him he couldn't leave her to die alone, and apparently that's why he agreed to stay. Time passed after the first stab wound, but she didn't die. According to Tony, she drank a bunch more Benadryl and at some point stabbed herself again. When she still didn't die, that's when she begged Tony to help her die, and she tried to get him to smother her with a pillow. He wasn't able to do it though, despite her begging, and she asked him not to tell her grandmother that she had killed the kids. And he said he wouldn't. Tony said that after she died, he tried CPR, but it was too late. He then tried his other various methods to take his own life over the next few weeks. The end of Tony's letter was just a list of issues that he had with his arrest. According to him, his interviews with the police shouldn't have been admissible or taken seriously because he couldn't discharge himself from the hospital, so he shouldn't have been able to waive his Miranda rights either. He also said that Megan was solely responsible for the fraud, although he was willing to take the blame, even though he found out that he was facing up to 2 years in jail for it. He ended the letter by telling his dad that he forgives him for, quote, not being there that night in 1980. It's not clear in the letter if he believes his father is innocent or not, though. Instead, he focuses on the fact that his dad wasn't there for the family during that night, just like Tony wasn't there for his family when they needed him. COVID-19 hit almost immediately after Tony's arrest, and things slowed but never stopped. Both sides prepared for trial, and Tony's lawyer moved to have his confession thrown out, and the judge agreed that one of the confessions could not be used, but the other taped confession, that one, it would be admitted, because yes, Tony confessed more than once. Another ruling was that the prosecution could not bring up the FBI case against Tony. This means they needed to build their case based on Tony's original story, that there was a murder pact between Tony and Megan, which led to Tony killing their children and eventually Megan. Then he was supposed to join them later in the afterlife. When the trial started, the prosecution presented their case, including the potential motive, and they used Tony's confession as the basis of their evidence. They also used the medical evidence presented by the coroner about how the family had died. But shockingly, they rested their case after only 3 days. For a case that had taken 2 years to go to trial, everyone was caught off guard, including the defense, who requested a delay. The judge denied it though, saying that they should be prepared, and the defense presented their case. And then Tony took the stand to testify. Tony's testimony was fairly close to what he had told his dad in the letter, that Megan had killed the children while he was out of the house, and that when he got back and saw what she had done, she tried to do the same thing to herself right in front of him. Then he spent the weeks he lived with their bodies trying to take his own life so he could join his family. His lawyer asked why he had told a completely different story to the detectives though, and here was his response.
You saw the video yesterday where on the 15th, Cole Miller and another investigator in a tiny room talked to you at length. Did you have an agenda for that discussion?
I don't even remember that day. Last thing I remember was falling down the stairs and smacking my head on the stairs, which resulted in a fracture of my neck. Next thing I knew, I woke up here. And seeing that video yesterday, that was the first time I saw that video. I had no agenda consciously, but I can tell you, throughout my relationship with my wife, especially after she got sick, I would put myself as a forefront and take responsibility and protect my wife.
You said in the statement that you stabbed the children and there was blood everywhere. Do you remember that from yesterday's video?
I remember it just seeing on yesterday's video. I wasn't aware of anything I said until about June, so maybe June or July, 6 months after I got here, when I got the transcript of what I said that day.
Why did you say that you performed the the incisions on the bellies of the children?
It goes back to the aspect is I was covering for my wife. Obviously, unsuccessfully, because as you saw by the video, compared to what they said, I had no clue had my kids died.
Did you have ideas of joining your family in the afterlife?
After I saw everybody die, after I saw my wife die and saw my kids, most definitely. I wanted to be with them. That's the only thing I wanted to be.
So that's how he explained the difference between his original confession and what he was currently testifying. Tony was on the stand for close to 2 hours, and I'll be honest, he did not come off very well at all.
Let me ask one thing at this point. What was the status of Megan's health when you first met her?
When I first met Megan, sorry, I just needed to collect myself. Megan had initially been diagnosed as a teen with Lyme disease. She went from a very strong, vibrant woman to barely holding on to 90 pounds. She couldn't keep weight on. She couldn't breathe. Her heart rate progressively was going crazy. At rest, it would be 190 or above. EKGs, all that kind of stuff, saw her throwing atrial fibrillations, PVCs, which it's basically your heart operates in a synchronous motion, okay? Valves pump on rhythm. Her valves and her chambers were beating all irregular. It was basically, you take 4 wheels of a car.
Objection, Your Honor, lack of medical knowledge and narrative.
It's a narrative system.
Mr. Todt, what medical training have you received in conjunction with the physical therapy?
I appreciate you asking me that, sir. I did not understand, nor did I follow this religious aspect. I was Roman Catholic. The way I was raised in a military family. My stepfather was a very proud military man. I was taught respect.
Unresponsive.
Repeat your question, Mr.
The
Ward.
question that was asked was,
You said that Megan had gotten diagnosed with Lyme disease as a teen.
That was her initial diagnosis, that's correct, and she had exacerbations. Like I had told you before, the diagnosis...
My question was a yes or no question. Let me ask my next question.
Well, allow me to elaborate.
My question was a yes or no question.
That's fine. Thank you, ma'am. There were times in which I would literally land, and I would get a phone call from my son or my wife that things are bad, and I'd hop on the first flight back.
Did that happen often?
It happened quite a bit.
And when you say things were bad, is this mentally, physically, what are you talking about?
All the above, from the miscarriage and bleeding, to the fact of her ripping the shelves off the wall and my boy was scared, to her breaking the dishes, to her not being able to get out of bed. And then as things progressed and I found that my older son was preparing a lot more meals, before I would leave for the couple days I was gone, I would make sure that
Objection,
there was...
non-responsive.
Ask your next question.
After I walked through the kitchen and saw the remnants of everything.
Okay, so you see everything still on the table, you pass the bathroom to go upstairs, right?
No, I went to the bathroom downstairs.
Okay, I thought earlier you testified that you went upstairs to go to
After
the
I went to the
bathroom.
bathroom. What I testified was I went to the bathroom, then went upstairs to meet my wife.
Okay. So at what point did she come to the top of the stairs then?
When I came out of the bathroom downstairs, she must have heard motion. She was at the top of the stairs.
Okay. So, were the doors to the library open or closed?
Don't know. Didn't see him.
Is the library not close to the stairs?
The library is past the stairs, that's correct. But when you have to pee, you have to pee.
Well, you're standing at the bottom of the stairs looking up at Megan at the stairs. You can't see the doors to the library?
Ma'am, can you see that gentleman back there?
Mike, you don't ask me questions, I ask you questions. Can you see the door to the library when you're standing at the stairs looking up at Megan?
No. She asked me not to leave her. She did not leave the boys.
So my question is, did you go for help, yes or no?
The answer is no.
After Megan dies, how long, what do you do? What do you do?
Well, we skipped over quite a bit there. I don't know if you want to go through everything or not.
What did you do after Megan died?
What did I do? I yelled out the window to see if anybody was around to help. There was some weird sound coming from her mouth. I thought she was breathing. I started CPR after I wiped her mouth off with that gray pillow.
Okay, so she stabs herself once or twice?
Like I said before, she stabbed herself a cumulative times of twice.
Okay. And these are right after each other?
That is no.
Okay, so what happens?
She stabbed herself the first time. I sat there pleading with her to allow me to find the phones, to allow me to leave her to go get help. My loyalty is to my wife. She did not want to be alone. I thought if I stood there, she said she was going through the inferior vena cava. I have medical experience to know that one of those major arteries will bleed out quickly. In the area of the house, we liked the house rental because there was no one around. Neighbors weren't there. Most of the neighbors around us were snowbirds. If I left her, I thought she was going to die. I thought in my decision making, the best chance was for her to tell me where the phones were. At one point, I hate to say I annoyed her. I was trying to convince her, trying to talk in her language, saying obviously the universe doesn't want you to go. She says, I want to be with my kids. I need to be with my kids. So I leave.
Objection, non-responsive. What do you do after Megan dies?
Like I said, I yell out the front window of our bedroom for anybody. Help, 202, please.
Tony portrayed Megan as almost unstable, damaging the house and not able to keep up with the family's needs. Everyone had always talked about what an involved, incredible mother she was, though, but according to Tony, some days she was too sick to function and had bouts where she was violent in the house, breaking dishes, scaring the kids. But it didn't come off well at trial, especially to Megan's friends and family who knew her to be gentle, who knew her to be a loving soul. They resented Tony's letter to his father, and they didn't care for his characterization of Megan either. Meanwhile, Tony tried to portray himself as a devoted father, doing everything for his wife, whose life was ruined by her actions. He then did everything he could to protect his wife because despite how poorly she treated him, he still loved her. As for the note, neither side admitted it as evidence, so we didn't see any of the details, just the broad strokes. At one point, Tony said that he ruined the original note that Megan had typed and printed for him, so he then retyped it and printed it out so that her final wishes could be known, which, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But there just wasn't a lot of attention paid to this supposed suicide note. Now, I wasn't there, and I don't know Tony's thought process, but his attitude and actions on the stand did not go over well. He was condescending, he was irritated, and he rolled his eyes at the prosecutor whenever she objected. Anytime he got emotional, he would snap out of it at any objection or question from his lawyer. And any emotion he did have did not seem genuine. He didn't seem like a man who was heartbroken about the death of his beloved wife and children. He seemed more like an arrogant jackass who wanted everybody to know that he was just another victim. He just didn't act the way that people expected him to, and I'm not saying that that makes him guilty. Nobody knows how a person reacts to a situation like this, but it definitely didn't help him. Personally, I don't believe him. I find it hard to believe that there was a death pact between Megan and Tony. I don't think that Megan knew what was going to happen. The fact that she had all of these intense alternative beliefs but never told anybody about them? Nobody has come forward to confirm Tony's story that she was following some kind of alternative path. So it's just weird to me that nobody but Tony ever heard her talk about it. Again, this is just my personal opinion, but it really seems like Tony knew his life was about to come crashing down. Money was running out. He was looking at a potential stay in federal prison for the Medicare fraud. So the carefully constructed life that he and Megan had created and that he worked tirelessly to prop up, it was about to come crumbling down. Whether Megan knew how bad the financial situation was with the business, I don't know for sure. I think that Tony, knowing that he was about to be exposed as a fraud and overworked from years of splitting time between two lives, I think it just forced him to snap. Not forced him, but I think it caused him to snap. The defense and prosecution gave their closing statements. The prosecution pointed out all of the issues with Tony's testimony and how none of it made any sense, and the defense pointed out that they couldn't even determine exactly how the family died, which was enough for reasonable doubt. Then the jury was sent to deliberate. After a few hours, they had a verdict. At first, they were deadlocked, but then the judge sent them back in to try to break it. An hour later, they had a unanimous decision. Tony was found guilty of 4 counts of murder and 1 count of animal cruelty. I do appreciate that Breezy is always included when it comes to this case too, because Breezy was even mentioned in the obituary for Megan and the children, which was published online. Tony, however, was not mentioned. Tony maintained his innocence after hearing the verdict, telling the court that he loved his family and he wasn't responsible for their deaths. He actually spoke for about 7 minutes, which was weird. It was like he was trying to plead his case one more time. Like most of Tony's testimony, left to his own devices, he rambled about what happened and presented himself as this loving father and husband. The judge, however, was having none of it.
The court has been present during the presentation of evidence throughout the entirety of the trial. A jury has unanimously determined, after listening to the evidence presented, that you, Anthony John Todt, are a destroyer of worlds, that you destroyed the world of your 4-year-old daughter, Zoe Elizabeth Todt, that you destroyed the world of your 10-year-old son, Tyler John Todt, that you destroyed the world of your 13-year-old son, Alexander John Todt, that you destroyed the world of your wife, Megan Denise Todt. The jury has unanimously determined that you murdered each of them with premeditation based on the evidence presented in this room. As to count 1, first-degree murder, of Zoe Elizabeth Todt, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As to count 2, for the premeditated murder of your son, Alexander John Todt, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As to count 3, for the premeditated murder of your son, Tyler John Todt, you are sentenced to life in prison. As to count 4, for the premeditated murder of your wife, Megan Denise Todt, you are sentenced to life in prison. Now, one of those lives was less valuable than the others. Those sentences will be imposed consecutively. You will be adjudicated guilty as to each count. For the murder of the family dog, you are adjudicated guilty and sentenced to the maximum sentence consecutive, which is 1 year in the county jail. You will get credit for any time that you have already served.
Tony appealed his conviction and still maintains that he's innocent. His family hasn't spoken out in support or against Tony since his conviction, although Megan's family and friends are happy that justice was served. They fully believe that Tony was responsible for this horrific crime. Like I said, in my opinion, Tony is guilty. He murdered his children and his wife as a last-ditch effort to control his life, which was spinning out of control. Family annihilation, it's a rare crime, but it does happen. And Tony, I think, in my opinion, has now joined the ranks. One of the motives given for family annihilators is control. When they feel like they're about to lose it, they do what they can to get it back. We probably won't ever know what Tony's motives were. It seems like he's determined to maintain his innocence, just like his father did 40 years before him. So we really can only speculate. But what everybody does agree on is this. Megan and her 3 children, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe, were bright, loving people who brighten the lives of anyone lucky enough to know them. They should have been able to live on and have amazing, fulfilling lives. But because of their father's actions, their lives were cut short, leaving a hole where the Todt family should be. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dark Chapters and hearing the Todt's family story. If you want to make sure that you don't miss any other episodes in the future of Dark Chapters, make sure to take a quick second and hit the subscribe button below. Thank you again, and until the next episode, stay safe. Bye.